Oh, welcome back to the Women's Entrepreneurship Symposium. We're about to start our next panel about young women in STEM. And at this time, I'd like to introduce you to our Director of Education and Outreach, Joyce Ward, here at USPTO. Joyce?
Thank you, Sean, and hello, everyone. So excited to be here today with these three dynamic women who are going to talk with us about young women in STEM and about how we innovate and get more young women and more students engaged. And so I'm going to go in alphabetical order and introduce each one. I am going to start with Joanne Bloomingfeld, who is from North Carolina State University and is an educator there. And I will ask Joanne to say a few words about herself, and then we'll introduce the other two panelists.
Hi, again, my name is Joanne Blumenfeld. I'm currently Program Director of Catalyst, Creating Opportunities in STEM for Students with Disabilities, and GIST, Geographical Information Technology Systems for Students with Autism. I've been an educator for over 20 years. I've taught pre-K through high school, both STEM and special education. I also have worked in the private field, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Joanne. Next, we are very happy to welcome Dr. Quincy Brown from the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy.
Thank you. So I am Quincy Brown. I'm a Senior Policy Advisor here at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. I am a computer scientist by training. And so I'm really excited to be here. I was geeking out on the previous conversation about 3D printing and look forward to chatting with you all.
Thank you, Quincy. And last but not least, Lee Estabrooks, or Dr. Lee Estabrooks from the Lemelson MIT program.
So I'm glad I wasn't the only one geeking out. Amy was just wonderful. Thanks, Joyce, for asking me here today to share my work with young inventors. Hello, everyone. I'm Lee Estabrooks, the Invention Education Officer with the Lemelson MIT program. I'm located in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I had experience in new product development for Fortune 500 companies prior to entering education. My work at the Lemelson MIT program has brought me into the classrooms, schools, communities, and lives of amazing students and teachers across the K-14 spectrum. From our work, we know that inventors are made, not born. So I look forward to our discussion today.
Thank you, Lee. And so let's just dive right in. Lee, you said something about invention and inventors and that they're made and they're not born. And I'm just thinking about what Amy said with regard to STEM and how that hands-on experience really had an impact for her. So I'm curious, I would like to hear from the three of you who each work with very different or have worked with various populations. How do we help bridge that innovation access gap, I guess, between how do we bridge the innovation access gap and create more opportunities for students from various groups to enter, persist, and strive in STEM and innovation careers or pathways?
Yeah, I was just going to say, what I appreciate about the conversation, the question, right, is that you called it an access gap. I think often some of the framing around the challenges are that there's certain groups who are not innovative, right? Or who don't, who are not part of the innovation space because that's not who they are. And so I think that addressing the gap starts with acknowledging that it is a gap in access and not a gap in being innovative and, being able to do ideation and developing products.
And so Quincy, just building on that, the gap, one of the things that I've noticed in my work is, especially in working with young women, is we need to invite them onto a pathway. We need to open doors for them. And, I've just seen it so many times that if we don't invite them in, they might stand back. And we really do need to hold the door open for them and walk with them, because unless we do that, they're not going to persist. They're not going to have that opportunity then to thrive. They first have to come through the door.
And piggybacking on what Lee said, it really needs to start pre-K. We all talk about college. I've taught pre-K, elementary, middle, and high school. So we have to start with our inventors in pre-K. I also taught 95% of my students were low income and BIPOC communities. We have to bring STEM to their families too. So it's really important when you talk about innovation, you have to start young so they know they can do it and provide access. And a lot of the problems that we face in public school systems or school systems in general is lack of materials. A lot of STEM is taught text-based, not hands-on. We used to have the old shops when I grew up. Now we have more maker spaces, but really access to materials and families getting on board and showing them that they have role models similar to themselves that can be successful. I think I also work with students with disabilities, and students with disabilities are typically discounted as inventors, although the most famous inventors had disabilities. So we have to start looking at making sure we don't talk the talk, but we walk the walk. NC State's motto is think and do, and we have to start doing the doing.
And MIT's is minds on and hands on. So I think we're all quite similar here. I heard a great story just this past weekend from a teacher down in Columbus, Georgia. I was asking him about the girls that were in his AP computer science course. How many were there? And he could count them on 2 hands. And so he said that those girls that were in the computer science program actually went out and recruited girls themselves to come into computer science next year. And I thought that was really great. And then he went on to tell me that these girls actually have created a club called Build Brave Girls. And I thought that was so wonderful, that they're taking it upon themselves to do peer mentoring and to bring their friends along with them.
And
Yeah,
that,
and I was just gonna say, I know that like the cohort recruiting into courses such as the CSAP course is a model that has worked across the country. And so that, as you extend the invitation to one young lady, perhaps you extend it instead of just to one, to 2 or 3, right? So that they kind of come into the course with community already.
and it's so important they feel welcome and they feel part of the situation. One of my favorite stories is always when we won the Invent Team competition, we went to MIT and my students were so nervous. I had students with wide range of disabilities and were very nervous to present. And they went to MIT and the first thing they said is, I don't know why we were worried. Everyone's like us here. So the point is you have to find a community. My Catalyst program is multiple years. They become like family. So building that sense of community is so important to the invention process and to get the girls to feel welcome. And those role models, I can't say enough. If my students go out and they see role models that are women or people with disabilities, I hire specifically college students with disabilities to be mentors so they can see there is a place to success. I think we also have to talk about failure. Failure is a good thing. So many of our girls, and even when I was in engineering school, was so afraid of making mistakes. So it's important that they know failure is okay. That's the best thing about engineering. Hurry up and fail, but how we then persevere is the really important question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked it when Amy held up her shoe. Yeah. So kind of a failure, kind of not. But, being comfortable enough to say, well, this one didn't work, but the next one will fit.
And I like to reframe that, right? I mean, I think, there's failure is a loaded word. And I think that, not all failing is not safe for a lot of people. And that's, the reality. So I like to think of it as iterating, right? And so it's not that you've failed, it's that you've iterated and you've learned something and you're changing your approach or what you do, or as she said, right, the scale was too large, she'll try it again, she'll make it smaller so it might fit her foot. I mean, I think thinking of like reframing some of those messages to what we really mean, so that we don't really mean that you failed. We really mean that you've learned something and you're iterating. And that's actually part of the process, right? And so I think thinking about things a little differently and in the messaging is also going to be helpful.
When we did a survey with our students, these are young inventors, male and female inventors, we actually talked to them about their failures, and they wouldn't ever say that they failed. They would just say, well, we're just learning forward. And so I thought that was, sage advice from high school kids. They were sensing that they were just learning a different way, learning how not to do something.
And it's good to teach them that the pathway is not always straight. So
Yes.
if they don't pass a math class 1 year, it doesn't mean they can't pass the other. My current doctoral student will tell the kids how she didn't pass high school physics and she's getting her PhD in physics now. So that perseverance is really what we have to teach the kids. And of course it's reiteration. I do love the terminology and I think we have to use positive terminology, but just to show the kids, just because it didn't work the first time doesn't mean you can't do it the second, third. If that's your goal and dream.
No, I absolutely love that and love what you said, especially about reframing and how we think about the language and think about the different groups and communities that we're working with, because we know this is Women's History Month and we're all gung-ho of how do we get more girls and more women engaged in STEM, and how do we get more girls and women thinking about invention and innovative pursuits. But we also know that women are very different, and we have such a wonderful and varied backgrounds. So my question to each of you is, what types of differences do we need to account for within different communities in order to engage more girls in STEM? As Amy said, we know some girls really like pink, some don't. Some girls are in rural areas. So what are some of those differences that we need to be mindful of, and then how do we approach those opportunities?
Well, I think the first thing is taking an inventory of what's in a community to support a young woman in STEM. Um, One size does not fit all. I happen to like pink and purple, but I know a lot of little girls who do not. So, when we're going into a community, we really need to take an inventory of what's in that community, what's in that school, and identify the strengths that are there. Notice the needs, yes, but identify the strengths and build on the strengths and talk to the people about what they want and what their desires are. In our case, for invention education or for a stronger STEM program within their school. We work together with our schools to provide programs and support that builds on their strengths. We want to be culturally responsive. We don't want to go in and say, hey, this is our way of doing it, and therefore it's the only way of doing it. That's so totally false. So we become partners with the schools and communities that we work with. I think that Joanne, when we were in your community, I thought of us as partners. Um, you know, I will say that we enjoy working with all girls teams of young inventors. Right now, we're working with a girls team that's located on the Carnegie Mellon University campus, and they are called Girls of Steel. And they're working on an invention to help people on the autism spectrum who are facing sensory, physical, and emotional challenges with exercise. So I found their problem that they're working on to be really quite interesting. Again, Joanne, I thought of you and the work that your students did a few years back. But we've also worked with a group of girls called DIY Girls in San Fernando, California. And these are girls who came to us with a really great problem to solve. But they were lacking in a lot of the technical skills, including coding. So inventing for them was really hard fun, if you will. So we were able to work well with both groups of girls. Their communities are different, their needs are different, their skills were different, but they had one great thing in common, and that was their passion to solve a problem that was important to them. And their desire to help others. So I think we really have to keep their needs in mind and not try to tell them a right way to do it.
And I think that engagement part is so important. So a lot of my female students like things that really engage them. They feel a personal human connection. So finding those projects that they have human connections for in their communities or global are so important. And while we look to students' strengths and community strengths, we have to also take a look at barriers and how we as educators and leaders can overcome those. So for example, I worked in a high school where students had to go to work after high school because they needed to help support their families. So we have free programs, we have Saturday programs. We send science kits at home they can do with their families together when they have time. So some kids don't have access to computers and Wi-Fi. So all those kind of barriers and impediments as a community and as a business and industry community, we have to come together to get rid of those. I spoke a lot earlier about internships are so important. That's a win-win for high school students. They can get paid, which helps overcome those income kind of issues, but they're learning a lot of STEM. It empowers them to learn a lot, to learn STEM skills and see themselves as future STEM professionals. So looking for the strengths and looking how we can overcome any barriers. Sometimes it's just logistics. I have to serve lunch. We do lunch and build time, whatever we need to do to get the kids at the table, because they are dealing with a lot of different situations in different places, and feeling welcome. Everybody is welcome. That, I know that sounds simple, but a lot of communities it's not as easily simple. I had a lot of kids wanting to come to my class just because everybody was welcome, even though I was just dealing with students with disabilities. And so I just want everyone to know that making it welcoming and looking at barriers and overcoming them, and definitely looking at strengths, but it's also important in communities for people to visualize what can be the future. If a kid is only seen working in fast food restaurants, they don't know. So instead of just talking about the MBA, let's talk about engineering. Let's get the kids out there and show them that there's opportunities that can help them enjoy and have a high quality life.
Yeah, and I appreciate the conversation about asset-based approaches. And I think that is really the key. And also thinking about the work that, you all do, that we all do as service, right? And so really keeping in mind who you are doing this work in service of, right? And the wholeness of what that means, and the fullness of their lives, right? And their families and their schools and just the broader community, I think is really, really key. I do want to also flag that the administration in the fall published a national strategy for gender equity and equality. And there are 10 priorities that are part of that. And one of them includes science and technology. Excuse me, there's another on climate. It actually explicitly calls out the need to encourage STEM innovation and entrepreneurship. And so people can go look that up. And so I just think that that's an important thing that the administration is doing, and really being explicit about the need for gender equity, gender equality, and also intersects with this conversation about innovation and entrepreneurship.
And self-advocacy is a very strong, important thing. My students met with the governor, with Senator Tillis, other government officials, just because it's important that kids raise their own voice. They sort of know what they need, and it's important with people in power to help meet these needs. And when I spoke not just about government, but industry, we can all come together as a community because we want to build a strong, innovative STEM workforce together.
And Joanne, you help students to self-advocate. And a lot of our students don't have that training. And I think that's very important for our programs to include that practice.
And I think, right, a complement to that is adults, right? So, it's disheartening to see students advocate for themselves and adults not know how to receive that. And so I think it would be a good thing that, the community also does, is working with adults to understand how to recognize that, right? It doesn't always look the way that adults might, we think because of the way we do it, but then how to be able to respond to that in a way that is affirming and empowering for the young people.
I love it. I love the idea of encouraging agency among students and getting them to think about raising their own voices. And I love the idea of actually hearing their voices. I was in a panel recently and someone said, it's interesting, we're talking about diversity and inclusion, and we're talking about how we solve problems for people, but we're not thinking about how we actually solve problems with communities, or with the people that we are trying to serve or the people that we are inventing for. So my question to you is, how do we make sure that we are hearing the voices so that it is more collaborative effort versus someone coming in and saying, here's how you do it, you know, here are the materials that you use, but how do we make sure that we have that community? I know that all of you in your various careers have been able to do that. So could you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, that to me started when I was in the US Peace Corps years ago after grad school. I went to a community woman there who was American, and it really takes 2 years to get to know the community before you can really have an impact, which that's why I say the Peace Corps should always be at least 5 years. But anyways, the point is you have to understand the community and get out there. I would ride the bus. I had my best parent teacher meetings on the bus. I couldn't, because the parents are busy. That's when you have to go where the people are. I went to so many churches on Sundays so I could meet people and talk with them. I think it's really important for people to engage communities, and parents all want their best for the kids. Engage the parents; they're your best assets. And I think that all those kind of things will really help you understand the community, and especially teaching kids self-advocacy skills. When I was in engineering school way back in the 80s, not mentioning my age, we got assertive training because there was only 2 of us women in the whole program back then. So we want to make sure our kids don't need assertive training. We want the kids to be able to speak and use their voices and use them in a constructive manner to create a better future for everyone.
So I actually reached out to a 10th grader to help me prepare for this panel today. You have to listen. You can't just go into a new community. You have to take the time to know them, whether the community is in rural West Virginia or right down the road from MIT. We're working with an elementary school that we say is in the shadows of MIT. But the young children at the elementary school, they don't even know what MIT is. We're talking just a few blocks away. And so we've actually been working in this one elementary school for about 5 years. And I say working, we've been visiting, we've been participating, we've been involved. And we were, I think, visiting the school for a couple of years before we actually started putting programming in place, because we really needed to know what they wanted to do. And we share our STEM message with the elementary school teachers because they also want the students to understand poetry, to understand crafts, to understand reading. And STEM just gets woven into their needs for their students. We talk to the students about inventors, and this is a lovely after-school program. It's called Sisters with a Dream, and we're helping them to envision themselves as confident young women who go to college and consider STEM and consider the ways they can help others. And be inventors. So, it's a shared message within the community. It's not just one message. It's not just our message.
Yeah, and one of the things, I don't want to be too wonky, is I think about, right, we talk in the administration about evidence-based policymaking. And so I think about, evaluation, and questions I ask is, to people who kind of organize and run these programs, how do you know what you're doing is working? How do you know that it's serving who you designed it for? And so I think thinking about that and the data that we collect and how that data is analyzed and used to inform the practice, I think those are all parts of this that, are the responsibility of the adults who are, funding, right, implementing, making those connections, establishing those partnerships. They should really be asking. Sometimes they're hard questions because things feel good and students, seem as though they're having a good time, but to really kind of look a little bit deeper to understand, are we really accomplishing our goals? Whose goals, right? All of those kinds of things are important to ask as we go about doing this work.
And I think incorporating STEM and invention process and helping the community, having that connection for the kids is so important because it really empowers the kids at a young age, knowing that they do have the power to improve the community and improve their lives. That's very important. And I really do think the family, our program at Catalyst, we're a multi-year program, and that's very powerful because the kids become like family. And looking at the data, our kids are successful in college and STEM careers. Our first group is graduating college this year. Very proud of them in all different STEM fields. So I think building that family unit and feeling those kind of connections really helps. Having those mentors is so important. And building the connections long term. You know, from starting in pre-K, we can't just start in high school and college. We really need to start young.
Now I have a question, Joanne, because you mentioned that it's important to get engaged and to stay engaged so that you have multiple touches. The question that we always get is, how do you scale programs like these? I've seen the work that you're doing in North Carolina. I've seen it with the MIT program or LMIT program. How do we scale these programs? Because so often we get that pressure to spread it to everyone in the US, to get all girls and all women engaged, to just package it and send it out so that every teacher can use it. And I know that you are, I mean, literally, you all are in the trenches and you've seen this, you've been around this. How do you scale, and is it important to scale?
Well, I think it's important
to get
everyone
kids
does
engaged.
something. You know, we go to that think and do, or the do part. So a small business can mentor 2 or 3 young women and provide them internships. So scale, you know, person who saves one life saves the world, the famous quote. So if everyone tries to, I don't want to use the word save, but if everyone tries to help one person, 2 people, 3 people, the impact can be huge. I mean, we all know the little starfish poem. I'm definitely a starfish person. And when you're an educator, you have to be a starfish person. You can't always help everyone, but you can help somebody. And that is so, so important to make sure. In terms of scale, I think doing events like this, Lee talking about her program, I maybe talk a little bit about mine, talking about our work. What we do, isn't rocket science. Well, I won't speak about Lee, but I'll speak about myself. What I do is not rocket science, but lessons that we have learned through the ages, we can share. I present at conferences. I show people how to make packs to take home with really little money so kids can do science at home. I show people how to teach students with disabilities. You know, sharing our knowledge base and just telling people they can do it, because if I could do it, anybody can do it, kind of thing. You know, it doesn't take huge. In terms of funding, it's important companies come on board. When I was in public school, our science budget for the whole year was $1.50. So I spent thousands of dollars every year of my own money just to buy cups and makerspace materials and donated things. And so just getting some of those supplies in and things for people. Teachers are already overworked, especially with COVID, to write grants. It's difficult for them. So coming in, helping them, coming in and speaking, doing those kind of things for kids. Those are the things we can do.
Scaling is hard. And one of the things that we found is the power of partnering. Working with other like organizations, there are enough kids for all of us. We don't need to be, you know, worried about someone having more kids than us, or this program having thousands of kids. Sometimes it's about reaching 2 or 3 kids. Other times it is about reaching more kids. But when our program can be integrated into the Catalyst program that Joanne has run, or with the Girls of Steel in Pittsburgh, you know, we can share our strengths with others that way. We have been partnering with a corporation here in Cambridge, and created Biotech in Action. We couldn't have done it by ourselves. They couldn't do it by themselves. Together, we created a really robust program that's, now I'm going to quote a number, we've reached 1,400 kids underserved in STEM over the past couple of years. we have partnered with the California Community College Chancellor's Office in Workforce Development to bring invention and inclusive innovation to 4 community colleges in California. And we're looking at taking it to 20 more community colleges in this next year. It was something that we could do together, not separately. And I think that that's really important for all of us to think about, is how can we build on each other's strengths?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and think about how organizations that invest and support programs can encourage collaboration, right? So we don't have this kind of scarcity model. So, acknowledging that there is some competition between organizations, but that there really is enough need to go around. And one of the things we have is the Federal STEM Education Strategic Plan, so that we've released that every 5 years. We're on the second one of those, but part of this current plan's focus is on STEM ecosystems. And so thinking about how we, think about an ecosystem in general, that they have to be healthy, right? Which means all parts have to be healthy. And so that if we're making investments, if we're supporting an ecosystem, a community, thinking about how we do that across and how we leverage these partnerships and, shared opportunities to really support in ways that foster that collaboration with, instead of the competition.
And we want our programs, the folks that we work with across the country, to understand their innovation ecosystem so that they know who to call when we step back out and go work in another community. We have to not have our schools solely focused on funding from us or programs from us. They need to understand what's available in their own backyard. Sometimes they don't. I found that teachers aren't all like Joanne. They don't all pick up the phone and make a call to say, hey, we need a mentor. Can you come in and talk to my students? Or, hey, I've got a kid here who's just ready for an internship. Do you have something for her? So, I think, helping our communities to be self-sufficient after us is important.
Yeah, and I think, there's a role to play for everyone, right? And I think, bless all their hearts, all of the teachers who are going through, all sorts of things now, especially, shouldn't have to necessarily be the ones to initiate that, right? So if there are organizations or companies in the community, right, in the backyard, for them to volunteer and call the school and say, hey, we have these opportunities. And so I think it really does take, everyone playing their part in understanding what they can do, right? As we mentioned before, whether it's one internship or 100, right? There's something that everyone really can do to support young people.
Yeah, and I think there needs to be some mindset switching too. A lot of my students with disabilities didn't see themselves as being able to be successful in STEM. And the professors didn't always see them. And once they start working together in the companies, they start seeing their future students, their future workforce. Same thing with women. So we do have a STEM workforce deficit in this country. And so we got to see everybody at the table to really create an innovative STEM workforce. And so to do that, everyone needs to take whatever steps they can do. Again, helping one person, helping 1,000, and definitely leveraging those community resources. And just like moms, we want our kids to be independent, and that's the goals of our organizations. I would love one day that I am no longer needed. I really would. So that is our ultimate goal, really. So I'm trying to work myself out of a job, if you want to know the truth,
Yeah.
So I think that's.
And I think it's important to emphasize that part, right? Because the challenges that we're trying to address are so grand, right? They're just vast. And we really do need everyone's minds and abilities and perspectives and experiences to be part of those who are creating the solutions. And so I think, like, even as we work with adults, right, and them thinking about what it means to be, good, right, at STEM, there's a lot of work that needs to be done there so that they can see the value that everyone is bringing into the solution process to really address the issues.
And what Quincy said about accessibility is so important, whatever level you're talking about. So, for example, at NC State, they started to do a neurodiverse physics class. You know, making things accessible. I know I've worked with companies that have changed their interviewing process, so students with autism would be more successful because they have the skill set, but maybe not the interviewing typical skill set. So, making more opportunities to meet the people where they are, because there are so many talents within them. That is so important.
Yes, I thank you all so much. I know the USPTO has a major initiative called the Council for Inclusive Innovation, where we're trying to work collaboratively with academic organizations, with other government agencies, with corporations, to really look at the innovation ecosystem and figure out how we get all of us working together and moving the needle forward. And one of the major chapters of that initiative is called Creating Innovators, and looking at how do we really engage students and how do we engage communities. So very excited to know and to hear more about all of the work that all of you are doing in this area. I would like to ask Lee Estabrooks. I know that you or that the LMIT program has worked some with first responders and getting first responders involved as well in the innovation process or working with schools specifically. And then
Sure.
after that, I'd like to go to Joanne and ask her to speak some about the Minding the Gap program in North Carolina that looks at biotech.
Sure. So obviously, to invent, you need a good problem to solve. And many of our teachers, our high school teachers, will actually reach out to first responders in their community and invite them in to meet with the students and ask them to share their work and the problems that they may experience within their work. First responders love going into schools, as we've seen. And they like to get to know the students as well. So this has been very positive. And, we've had one team in particular that actually invented, because of their work with first responders, a device that traverses ice and deploys a camera into a break in the ice to basically be a first responder for the first responder. So that while a team, a first responder team is suiting up to dive under the ice, they're already exploring, why is there a break? Has someone fallen through the ice? Has an animal fallen through the ice? Has a snowmobile gone through the ice? So this has been really successful in some of our schools. Again, bringing people in from the outside, whether they're first responders, whether they're medical workers, whether they're working on environmental programs for the local town or community, bringing the experts in from the community to actually share their work experiences and the problems with the students. It's just been an exceptional way to engage young inventors.
I would piggyback a little on that. We do a lot of global projects. Nothing excites kids more than meeting kids from other countries and learning about different cultures. A lot of my students had not even been to the beach in North Carolina. So just to learn about people from Africa, I had a program in South Africa or other countries. It really gave them impetus to really be wanting to be inventors. So global projects are a great way. Community-based projects, just what are the problems in your community and how can we solve them? So knowing that they have that power is just so very important.
So Joanne, can you share the community project that your team worked on with us?
Oh,
Just
okay, yeah. So that was wonderful. So we took the kids to a farm, and we're all city kids. It's the first time I was in a big corral with a bunch of cows, you know. And they said they're like big dogs, so I asked if they're pit bulls or labs, you know, because the cows are pretty big when you're next to them. But they learned all the issues farmers face, and they went around and they spent days with the farmers, and they went to the vet school, and then with that they decided they knew lameness in cows was an issue. It reduces milk production and also hurts the animal. So then they invented that mat that was a low-cost mat that was able to detect lameness in cows as a screening tool, and it was a low cost. So just bringing the kids out to the field to see what the issues are is it's also very empowering. One of the best things about that project was they saw they could do. You know,
they saw
they
they could do.
just once they had
And
that power, you know, we went to MIT. Those kids are graduating college now, all with STEM degrees, and that's all due to the Lemelson MIT Inventing Competition program. So these things can be very powerful for kids. And I think the most powerful thing for that was that parents, instead of seeing some of these kids as burdens, saw them as future breadwinners and inventors. You know, just flipping that mindset switch,
Yeah.
you know, that they can do this. It's just so empowering to the parents and the professors. You know, they started seeing their future students.
I don't think I'll ever forget standing with some of the parents at MIT off to the side. And I think we were all crying, quite honestly, watching these kids present. And one parent said to me, I didn't know what he was capable of doing. And look at this. So again, it's opening doors, it's making opportunities available, it's working on problems that the kids can feel, can interact with, whether it's talking to a first responder, talking to a farmer, um, being engaged with a real world problem that might take place across the ocean in another continent. It's just finding a passion and having the persistence to work through to find a solution that 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 they're proud of. And some of those solutions, quite honestly, even at the high school level, are patentable solutions. Kids are smart. And kids working collaboratively can come up with some really great ideas. So we need to celebrate that good work. And I think celebrating the good work is something that our communities can do. Really showcase the work that's going on with students of all ages, showcasing them locally and celebrating them locally is very important.
Yeah, I appreciate that you both mentioned, parents, right, and families. And so we think about ecosystems, that they are an essential, important part of that. And I mean, I've never met a parent who didn't want the best for their child, right? They may not always know, what that looks like, or be able to articulate that. But once they are clued in and understand, like, so many opportunities and doors open, that they will go jump through all sorts of hoops to make opportunities possible, right, and available to their young people. And so I think that's a really important piece of the ecosystem that we don't talk about engaging with, enough.
And having those mentors is very important. One of my students, she wants to be an astrophysicist. She wants her PhD. So she's matched with a professor at our school who's neurodiverse too. And she looked at her that first meeting when they started their internship, and she said, I know you can do this, and I will be with you till you do this. So having those important, powerful role models is very important. And for kids to see the vision, if they've never met an engineer, how are they going to have the vision to be an engineer? If they've not met an inventor, we have to show the kids, these people exist, and we don't talk about them. I have a man come teach us about African American inventors. We all see red, green streetlights. Did we know? The kids didn't know that was an African American man who invented that. So make sure kids see connections that are powerful and that they can do it. I think it's important.
And I think it's also important to show, right? I mean, as we talked earlier about iterating, show that people aren't doing this, in isolation, right? There are a lot of stories that make it seem as though, all these inventions happen in someone's garage, and that's the way that it works. That's not really how it happens, right? And that there are teams of inventors and teams that receive patents. And so I think, I'm looking at Joyce's picture on my laptop, but, like, thinking about the fullness of the process and really making that transparent, I think that also goes a long way into helping people understand that they can do it and they do belong, right? And they do it with other people. And that's really just a natural part of the process, rather than this kind of myth that's, it's this lone person, in a dark basement doing all, coming out with all these ideas on their own, and then coming out with, some patent, right? That's just not how it works. For the vast majority of cases. And so I think we should make that more explicit and clear to people, and young people especially, so they can see themselves in reality.
Teaching those workforce readiness skills are very important. It's good to know the STEM, but you have to know how to collaborate and communicate in a STEM environment. You have to know how to interview. And some of my students did not have those skill sets, and some of my students in my program, and giving them those empowers them to feel confident they can work in the STEM. So I think that's another.
And when we're working with young inventors of all ages, we're really working on those workforce readiness skills. Presenting your good idea in front of people, collaborating, working on a team, communicating, whether it's as you get older on social media or just, within your classroom. And those skills they'll take with them into their college and into their career and into their personal lives as well.
Now, you mentioned the importance of work experience as well, and work-based learning experiences. I know we touched on it a little bit, but I wonder if we could talk about work-based learning, and are there opportunities to support students to gain some of these soft skills as well as the technical skills, and to see mentors? How can we do that through work-based learning?
Yeah, and I think. I was just going to say, and I think an important piece of that is paid work-based learning. And so it's really important that we pay people to do the work, even young people, and that we provide them with meaningful experiences. And so there are some that are happening, they're all over the federal government. And so some are, like from NSF, there are REUs, the research experiences for undergraduates. There's a research experiences program for teachers. There's also one for high school teachers. There's some that are aligned with like funding for SBIR, the small business grants, and the small STTRs. I'm getting all my acronyms confused. But there are lots of opportunities that are there that are explicitly focused on providing these paid work-based learning opportunities for young people.
When we piloted invention and inclusive innovation at 4 community colleges in California last year, the summer work was done in workshops, and all of the students were paid in some fashion, some form, by some fund, whether it was from a local philanthropist or Title III or Title IV funds. There were funding sources available, and that's super important when you're talking about students who have to decide whether to take a workshop, be in a workshop, or work to put food on their table. And if we want them to learn in certain situations, well, we're going to have to pay them. I was visiting a high school last week, and the principal mentioned to me 3 ships, the 3 ships. I'm going, the 3 ships? And he said, yes, scholarship, mentorship, and internships. And he said it's so important that the students, even at the high school level, their good work is acknowledged with pay.
And that really helps make things more accessible. My students all have internships in my Catalyst program. So by the time they're a senior in high school, they've had 4 or 5 STEM internships on their resumes. It helps them get into college. It helps them access scholarships. It helps them, some of the partners will hire them in college. So all those skills really help keep the pipeline going. And they're so, so very important.
Yeah, and we think about these and talk about these as our pathways and bridges, right? Especially through those transition points, right? From secondary to post-secondary, that we have those bridges and those on-ramps are there for people who are, I think it was mentioned earlier about, the path is not linear, right? And so the reality is that there are some people who don't go straight from high school into four-year degree. They take all these sorts of twists and turns, and we have to make sure that those paths are accessible, right? And that accessible in two ways, right? In multiple ways, and that there are people with all range of abilities who are able to access the paths that we have created that are to be, wide open.
Agree. I know one of the programs that USPTO is working on or has this year is a high school work-based learning paid internship program. And of course, because it's the USPTO, we want the students to learn about innovation and intellectual property and certainly entrepreneurship. But one of the things that we have added this year is that we're giving the students time to work on their own projects so that we can try to bring in that personal element of where it's something that's relevant to you that you care about. So we have like this amazing cohort of students, and at least 3 of them actually already have their own small businesses, which I just think is incredibly cool and inspiring. But I want to just ask you just how, from the standpoint of community engagement and community involvement and universities, how can community partners, universities, government agencies, how can, if you had one thing that you could say for how can those various organizations support young people or get more girls engaged through work-based learning experiences, what would you say to them, or what would you encourage?
Well, I think it's pretty easy to do in a way. Think about what you're doing and think about the skill set of a high school student and how you can scale up or down. Some of our kids have what I call splinter skills, like we all have, really high in certain levels and not high in others. So think about what skill sets they have in a project that they can do in the time set that they're given so they can feel successful, and teaching them the skills. It's an investment in companies' future. They need these kids. If we want an inclusive, innovative workforce, we really need this should be a must for every company and small business, whether it's one person or 50 people, however many you can help. It's so very important. And it doesn't take a lot of time. We have done virtual internships, like if we're dealing with NASA, because we can't get the kids to Houston, so the kids can work on their own, and then they can just meet with their supervisors once a week virtually. That's a model companies can use too. They can be in-person ones. So either or, it's just such an important process for the kids and for the companies.
And I think that the key there is, right, they're meaningful experiences. And so that is an important point of that, right? That at any age or any ability, no matter what that is, there's something meaningful and a meaningful way that a young person can engage and contribute in a way that, that really helps the project or the organization, right? And gives them a sense of understanding how all of these pieces fit together, right? How the theoretical or whatever they're learning in school actually matches the practical and comes together in this, in this project. And so I think the meaningful part of that, in addition to the paid, is really important.
Yeah, meaningful and real, not made up. Don't make work for a young person. We've had internships actually here at the Lemelson MIT program from a local community charter school. And that was really eye-opening for us. We learned as much from, in this case, it was a boy. We learned as much from him, I think, as he learned from us about how to engage with this meaningful work. And like you were saying, Joanne, the splinter skills. And I was so pleased that he reached back out to me recently to let me know that he's had his first publication, and thanking me for making him learn how to work in Excel. So, I mean, sometimes it's the simple things, but we don't know sometimes as adults what a student needs until you're working with them in-depthly, and that can come from an internship. Kids need to see the real world. How can they form a vision for themselves if they don't know what their opportunities are. And the past 2 years, COVID's been really tough. You know, it's just been tough. But we were able to work through our Biotech in Action and show students opportunities within the biotech field, show them opportunities inventing within biotech. And the students came away thinking, gosh, you know, there are so many different careers within biotech that I didn't know about. You know, I don't have to wear a white lab coat. I can be in a communications role in a biotech firm. I can be an intellectual property lawyer in a biotech firm. You know, so the students are really learning from bringing mentors into a virtual space, and talking to the students about uh, the way they got to where they were. And it was also in those conversations that the students took away that they didn't have to know right now. They didn't have to know as a junior or a senior in high school what they were going to be in 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And they learned that people do and can change their trajectory. You know, it took a lot of pressure off the students. So those were virtual internships, and they worked out very well. Um, and we were actually able to reach more students that way. So, you know, it's while we love in-person internships, let's not discount the virtual internships.
I I am curious as to whether I would imagine you've had more opportunities to bring in people um, from a variety of fields with the virtual opportunities. I mean, just in terms of
Yes.
some of the research scientists or some of the inventors, I know we've had a lot of success with getting people to um, talk to students through Zoom or WebEx or an electronic means, more so than with in person, although that definitely has its downsides. But I wonder if you could speak more to some of the, I guess, some of the benefits or some of the opportunities that you can see that have been created in this new environment that we find ourselves in.
Gosh, we were able to bring so many people into the lives of young people um, virtually. We brought our high school inventors in to talk to young people in this Biotech in Action summer internship. Our MIT professors could join virtually far easier than they could have joined had they have had to leave their lab and travel across even the city. We were able to bring, you know, people from the West Coast in, and we were able to match um, uh, themes, if you will, and speakers from all across the country to come in and talk to the students. It really was quite rich, and the students gained from it. So, you know, uh, if there was a silver lining to COVID, it was how to reach students virtually, how to keep them engaged. And these were 1 and 2 week um, uh, opportunities. They were free opportunities. And we were reaching students all across the country and in one case across the world. So it broadened everyone's views.
One thing I think is important to remember is to, while they're wonderful and I love our virtual ones, to keep a hands-on component.
Yes,
So, you know,
yes,
when our kids worked at NIEH, I had a student, she was interested in toxicology. She had chemistry lab material, the mentor had chemistry lab material. With SAS, they did robotics and coding, but they did the hands-on component because I taught during COVID too last year. After a while in science, you're going to get kids to zone out. So it's very important when you have virtual internships, you have a hands-on some certain component for the kids, even if it's matching kits or matching whatever, building the robot or whatever materials the kids need, so they can do that hands-on. Again, you can get kids where they couldn't go. We had kids working at Alamos National Lab. I can't get the kids there, right?
Yeah.
So, I think that's a really good benefit, like Lee was saying too.
And we were able to utilize laboratory simulations. Again, we couldn't take students into the community lab at Biogen like they had done in previous years. But we used technology, and it worked out pretty darn well. I was really blown away when we did Biotech in Action this fall on Saturdays, thinking, kids aren't going to join us on a Saturday. And man, they were with us for 10 weeks. And on the last day, they didn't want to leave us. It was really strange telling them it's okay if you end the meeting now. It's okay that this is over because we'll still be a part of your network and you can still reach back out to us. But again, virtual internships, virtual experiences have their place, not as a replacement, but they have their place.
And Quincy, I know that your background is electrical engineering and computer science. And so we would definitely be remiss if we did not talk about some of the opportunities that exist in CS and some of the opportunities both for hands-on and in-person learning or opportunities to engage students across disciplines. Because there are just so many opportunities to explore across disciplines versus in the silos.
I'll just say, I mean, I was listening to that part of the conversation before about the field trips and going out and looking at the cows, and I thought about transdisciplinary learning and the fact that, really to solve, again, these complex problems, we do have to really look at all of the disciplines and, think about how we need knowledge from each of the individual disciplines to create this full solution. And computing, to me, I'm biased, is one that is kind of horizontal, right? I mean, so much of the computational power, right, the algorithms, the data, and the analysis rests on this computing understanding. And so I'm a fan of saying that, like that foundational knowledge is also one that everyone needs as well.
One of my female inventors, who is a patented inventor, was asked by a group of middle school students what she wished she would have known going into college. And Caitlin answered, how to code. And she said, I did okay. However, if I would have known how to code, I wouldn't have been learning how to code while also trying to apply it to a project. And that was a statement that Caitlin made probably 5 or 6 years ago. And now the inventions that we're seeing young people work on, they're all IoTs or some type of physical computing. Joanne, the work that your students did in that area, that was about 6 years ago too. That was about at the same time, but we've seen a real transition to physical computing, and the need for coding is extreme.
And I think even if that doesn't become your specialty, understanding it enough, because again, we talk about teams and collaboration, you will likely end up working with someone who's playing that role, and you need to be able to communicate and understand the solutions and have a really deep conversation about that. So though you may not be passionate or really interested in going deep into that area, it's important to understand enough so you can communicate with your colleagues, right, your team members.
Yeah, one of my students, I remember when we met with the governor, one of the things he self-advocated for was coding meet the language requirement for college. Why do I have to learn French? Can't we learn coding, and can't that suffice getting us into college? Because that's a much more useful language according to the students. So, it's good to start young. We started in pre-K. You have to start young, so it's more intuitive.
So, ladies, thank you so much. I understand that we are already a little bit over, but I do have one final question for you. And I know that we are all about commitments and wanting to make sure that we give people an action plan. And asking, what can I do? What can I do when I leave here? And so I'm going to ask each one of you to commit to at least one thing, or at least tell us what you will commit to doing. And we throw that same challenge to our audience. We hope to let us know what thing will you do, or what things will you do when you go back to your community to encourage more, certainly more girls and more women in STEM and invention and innovation, entrepreneurship. What one thing will you do? So I'll go to Joanne first.
Well, I feel like my whole program in a way is a commitment to doing this. We really strive hard to have everybody in the innovation process and included in the STEM workforce. I think we all need to remember the starfish model. If we all try to help a few kids, the world is going to be a better place. So small businesses, just take 2 kids to be interns. You know, big businesses, broaden out, have speakers, give funding, do all those kind of things. I think we can all be part of the solution, and we really want to make our workforce innovative. And the only way to do this is if we all start building this now.
So I'll go next, Joyce.
Okay, and then we'll close out with Quincy.
So, in thinking about all of what we've been talking about today, I am going to reach out to the teachers that I work with, and I'm going to ask them specifically how many girls they've invited into their STEM programs. And then I'm going to reach out to the girls down in Columbus, Georgia, and I'm going to thank them for reaching out to their peers and inviting them into their computer science world.
And I'll share that OSTP is committed to releasing a national STEM equity strategy that will address issues related to the participation of girls and women in STEM.
Okay. And Sean, I will turn it back over to you, but I will just say that I'm gonna commit more to making sure that we are engaging with and inventing with our students, and not just for, that we're thinking about their voices when we structure programs, and we're thinking about the teachers' voices, so that it is collaboration and not just us providing what we think should happen.